Perspective podcast, and today we're going to talk about or cover two of the most depressing topics: civil rights movement in the 1960s and the Great Depression. My name is Yazan Alish.
My name is Mohammed Aidni.
And today we're going to host this episode.
So, the Great Depression was basically the worst economic downturn in the history of the industrial world, and it lasted from 1929 until the late 30s. It began when investors took 16 million stocks out of the stock market, and what happened is the investors were quickly losing faith in the American economy. Therefore, the 60 million shares and stocks were taken quickly. So they didn't take stage by stage. They were taken immediately out of banks and the companies, and therefore it caused the whole downfall. Now, what happened to people is there's a global crisis that happened, not even affecting America by itself. It affected the whole world, but mainly America. This is where, because Americans were the strongest country, strongest economy, therefore they wrote history. The stock market crashed. There's people. One out of each 4 people were out of jobs. So they couldn't have any jobs. They were broke. Their families could end. Some families ended. Some people died of hunger. Now, it's important to know about the Great Depression is it shows the important roles of money and how it's important to society right now. There's about 10,000 banks that fell or failed during the Great Depression, and seriously, it was a depressing thing. People were the bread is the best thing they could find at that time. Okay, soup was many luxuries were before the Great Depression. Things like oysters and other luxury food was widespread. But then after the Great Depression, no one could afford that. So that ruined the economy of each of these luxury foods. Now, some communities like the black community or minorities like the Mexican people, Arabs, they were okay in living in America in those causes because they used to live in that same ecosystem or environment that white people were living during the Great Depression, where they couldn't afford luxury food or all of that. And some of them weren't even depressed. Like one of the videos we did in the A assessment, do you remember that?
Yeah.
So that video, he said we lived during a depressing period and we weren't even depressed. That shows that they were living the same thing. Nothing affected them because they were already low level. No offense, but they were already low level due to the racism and segregation. But when it happened to white people, I think it was a sign from God telling them, you know what, you're just acting the same way that happened to you, to these black people, or minorities in this case. So, as a karma, it's kind of karma. That's what I predict. It being karma, and then people fight, God gave them the same thing that they did, just to, for karma and payback. That's one of the things I predict. The social consequences. Most of the Americans lost their jobs, which could mean failing of families, people dying of hunger. Now, there's about 200,000 to 20,000 to 200,000 businesses went bankrupt and shut down. Now, of course, some major companies at that time, major businesses that went worldwide were maybe not that affected as big as small businesses. Small businesses need a lot of money to work at that time. So they could easily go bankrupt, but big companies, at that time there wasn't that many companies, but the big businesses, it's hard for them to go bankrupt. Now, to mark the end of the Great Depression, when World War II started, it basically put 17 million people, or Americans, in war. Now, of course, this is around the world. I can connect the Great Depression to other big crises that happened. Now, the Soviet Union was a crisis by itself. People were hungry, people were poor. that's similar to this, but it lasted longer. What happened in World War One, again, same place, Russia, was where basically everyone was hungry. That's when the communist revolution kind of helped it, but then longer time, the Eastern European countries went hungry for a long time. Other stuff like that is the most recent one, which is kind of a mini version of the Great Depression, is 2008. The economic crash of 2008, you know that?
Yes, I do.
So basically, same thing happened, except that not that many
It
people.
was severe in 2008, but this one was.
This one was way worse
yeah,
because
way
people
worse.
at that time, there was no companies, major companies, or major banks. They
In
didn't have.
2008, there was like, it was a short period of time. There was like an easy solution, but back then it was harder to find. They tried many solutions, but like it took them long time, like a really long time, to find the solution that is suitable and that would like stop this crisis.
So in 2008, what they used was they used the Islamic
Way of
economic,
banking.
yeah, way of banking. Well, there's no bribery, no interest, nothing. That's how they got out of it. But before, there was no major powers to hold money, like major banks. They didn't have as much power as they had. That's why the 2008 lasted for a way shorter time than this. And the World War II, they put a lot of people in war, and basically they gave them employment. So a ton of people, like 17 million or 12 million. So 12 million Americans, and then took 17 million out of America. And that was actually good. Like I don't know how, but a war can do a good, bad thing at the same time. Like it killed off many people, and there was like segregation towards Jews in Europe. But at the same time, it solved the Great Depression. So somehow it's kind of a little good and a little bad.
It has positives in certain factors and negatives in others.
Now, the second one is kind of more depressing, but like we can be happier towards. Since you're gonna talk about the Civil Rights Act in 1960.
Yeah. So before we start, we can relate the topic you just talked about to a word that you may hear it every day: slavery. It is the act of injustice, inequality, and etc. against other people who differ in races, religion, and other factors. This led to like the serious conflicts that happened in the future, such as the Great Depression, which you just talked about.
Well, it kind of doesn't have to do that much with it, since the Great Depression didn't mainly affect them. It wasn't based on second line. It was based on the economic wise, not the social.
Yeah, but now we're gonna talk about an important topic, which is American Civil Rights Movement, which happened in between the 1950s and 1960s. So the Civil Rights Movement was a struggle for social justice that took place mainly during the 1950s and 60s for blacks to gain equal rights under the law in the United States. The Civil War had officially abolished slavery, but it didn't end discrimination against blacks. They continued to endure the devastating effects of racism, especially in the South. By the mid-20th century, or the 1900s, African Americans had more than enough of prejudice and violence against them. They, along with many white people, mobilized and began an unpredictable fight for equality that spanned for over 2 decades.
So, what I heard from research on World War II, since it's a major topic between these two, it connects them in that kind of way. So it's World War II ended like the Great Depression, but then started something else. So in World War II, most black people and minorities weren't given high-paying jobs like in the military. But after World War II, they started working as low-wage farmers and factory workers, and servants to some rich and powerful people. Now, this also is a type of segregation, which connects to yours. And somehow World War II connects both of them. I heard about activists like Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks. Can you tell us about Rosa Parks and what she did?
Okay, so Rosa Parks, she was an important character in this event. As in the 1955, she was riding a bus in Alabama. Then she once they told her that there is a white woman who wants to like take a place in the bus, and there was no other place for her, so she refused, and she didn't want like this type of segregation. And also there were other activists such as President Harriet Truman, who issues Executive Order 9981 to end segregation in the armed services. Now we move on to another event which is related to the topic, which is the Brown versus Board of Education. As there were 5 cases which were decided by the Supreme Court, and these 5 cases effectively ended racial segregation in public schools. Many schools, however, remained segregated, especially in the southern region.
I heard the southern region was the place that people will not chill. They see a black person, they immediately get offended or hurt in some way. I heard about that they ended Jim Crow law. I don't know what's that.
It's another topic.
Yeah, it's another topic, but that was a law that kind of removed it wasn't saying we need them to be equal. They're not slaves anymore.
Yeah.
That's what I heard about it. Probably, maybe not right, but that's what I heard about it. Now, who else? Like, who's the biggest activists in the segregation and the civil rights movements?
Rosa Parks, Harriet Truman, Martin Luther King.
Martin Luther King, yeah. You know his famous "I Have a Dream" speech and how he used literature in some kind of way to fight segregation. That was a brave thing of him. But then the people and protesters were washed down by many water trucks. It happened to many countries now, like Egypt in 2011, I believe, and now like Lebanon.
Yeah.
So there's many Arab countries that are suffering from the same thing, but it's just fighting for different reasons. Same thing, same protesters, but they don't use literature now, as like Martin Luther King.
Use power to fight back.
Use power in numbers.
And that's how we can relate it to this subject, which is language and literature, as it played a huge part in a lot of events. An example, which is this event where Martin Luther King used literature to fight back segregation, slavery, and racism, and other types of negativity towards the community. And also, after we talked about this topic, we can say that many events occurred throughout this period, but at the end, due to civil rights movement and many other events, it helped to fight back negativity that was going on throughout the community. For example, slavery, separation, segregation, racism. These were breaking down the community, but instead, by the bravery people had, people who were segregated.
Kind of the courage at that time to fight back. I've heard about Mildred D. Taylor and many authors, but as long as these topics were connected by war, we can relate both topics by current and recent events that happened that are very similar. So the protests in the Middle East, we can connect it to the civil rights movement. It's not that big, not the same size, but both have the same aim. These both concept basically. And the other one, which is the 2008 economic crash, we can relate it to the Great Depression. Not the same size again, but they had the same concept. And both were solved in a different way. One with war, and the other was using a different religion. Well, they weren't mentioning religion mostly, but they copied the same thing. They just didn't call it the Muslim economy.
As Muslims do when they or in Islamic banking, they did the same thing.
So this is the Perspective podcast. We'll be releasing maybe every month or week, depending on our schedule. We'll not mainly talk about politics and other stuff like that. Maybe talk about society. It'll be just chatting. This was inspired by an English project, and then we took it as an important thing.
Yeah.
We could use it to spread messages, just like popular authors and artists in the Harlem Renaissance and all of these events, which we can connect it to real life problems, texts, and all other versions, even to ourselves sometimes.
Yeah.
So we'll be releasing more podcasts talking about social, maybe even schools and how they're bad for people, AI. We'll just chat about stuff. So Till the next podcast, see you.